Well, hello, everybody. Today we have a wonderful guest with us, and I'm excited for you to hear this topic. Today we have Dr. John Lewis joining us, and he's the founder and president of Dr. Lewis Nutrition. So, Dr. John Lewis has a PhD and a passion for educating all of us, everyone, about the importance of nutrition and supplementation and exercise for health. And in particular, he studies and applies clinical nutrition for the benefit of mankind. But what makes Dr. Lewis special is he has conducted over 30 different studies in his research career, evaluating the effects of nutrition, dietary supplementation, and exercise. And he has over 180 peer reviewed publications in some of the world's leading scientific journals. He also has a seminal publication from his Alzheimer's study in the Journal of Alzheimer's Disease. So to say that Dr. Lewis has a lot of experience is an understatement. And today I think you're going to find this conversation really interesting. We're going to discuss some of these studies you've done, Dr. Lewis, and also a couple of other things that I'm pretty sure my clients and followers are going to find really helpful. But before we get into that, would you like to give us a brief look at your background and how you got to where you are today? Why did you even get into nutrition and supplementation as well? Because there's usually a reason that we do this.
That's right. Well, thank you very much for the kind introduction, and I appreciate the opportunity to be here with you and your listeners, and I'm looking forward to our conversation today. I would say, like most people, my journey is a long one, and as the Beatles said, it's a long and winding road
That it is.
to to where I am today, and it's still long and it's still winding. Hopefully, I have many more years of opportunity to help people, but I would say I would take it all the way back to when I was a little kid. When I was like 3, 4 years old, my grandfather got out in the backyard with me and pitched baseball to me, even though the poor man had the worst rheumatoid arthritis in his hands you can imagine, but he still got out there and got me playing sports. And so all through high school, I played anything with a ball other than soccer. I just loved playing sports. And
Mm.
after high school, I got into drug-free competitive bodybuilding in college. I competed in bodybuilding for a number of years. I wasn't willing to take drugs. I knew that was a risk not worth taking because I didn't consider myself to be somebody that was going to pursue that as like, just my own profession or to try to make a living as a bodybuilder. I didn't see myself doing that. But what
Yeah.
bodybuilding allowed me to do was to really sort of focus in on how nutrition and exercise can be utilized to achieve specific goals that playing sports as a kid, as a high school student, I had no appreciation for that. But trying to become a competitive bodybuilder, I mean, you can say whatever you want about the drug use in that particular pursuit, but you still have to work very hard. Even if you do use drugs, you still have to work very hard, and you have to be very driven and focused, and you have to really appreciate how the body responds to how you eat and how you move it. So if anything, bodybuilding did that for me. But as I realized I was not going to pursue that for any kind of profession or, way to make a living, I shifted my focus really from more sports performance to more health performance. And I still didn't really have an idea at that point in my life that I would become a researcher. I refer to myself as kind of like a chameleon or like a piece of clay. I sort of adapt to whoever I'm with at that time in my life and the people around me and what their interests are. And then that sort of helps shape me in terms of guiding me and making decisions along my journey of, higher education and training and whatnot. And about 20 years ago, I met two people around the same time who did not know each other, but who came into my life at roughly the same time. One, Dr. Reg McDaniel,
Mm.
a pathologist by training, who I met through a mutual friend at the University of Miami. And Dr. McDaniel introduced me to his story about using polysaccharides from aloe vera and how he had had just these extraordinary responses and just experiences with utilizing this particular nutrient. And I knew nothing about it. I had I had no clue what he was talking about, but I was, and I still am, a very open person in terms of, if I meet you and you explain to me what you're doing, and give me the sort of the foundation of what it is that you've experienced, and it sounds like something that I want to either pursue or incorporate into my own life, then that's the kind of person that I am. And the lady that I met at that time, Miss Barbara Kimley, was a cancer patient at the University of Miami, and Barbara had sort of the same story Reg had, other than her story was involving rice bran polysaccharides. So it was fascinating that these two people came into my life roughly the same time.
Mhm.
Both were talking about polysaccharides. Neither one knew each other. One in Dallas, Texas, Dr. McDaniel, the other one here in South Florida in Fort Lauderdale. But they both incredibly changed not just my career, but my entire life. And that's a big reason why I'm actually sitting here talking to you today, because fast forward now almost 20 years later, you mentioned the research I've conducted and the papers I've published. A big part of that work centers around all of this research that my colleagues and I have conducted on polysaccharides, and how profound these two particular nutrients from aloe vera and rice bran are in terms of their impact on human health. And so I've just been very lucky in the sense of this, figuring out a career or a pursuit professionally that very much aligns with my personal interests in nutrition and dietary supplementation and exercise and health. And so I still I still live like a bodybuilding type routine, although I don't compete anymore. I actually shifted in my diet. I've been eating a plant-based diet for the last 27 years. I take these polysaccharides that I've conducted all this research on. So I have, what I consider to be a very comprehensive approach to my own health
Mhm.
and my family's health, plus doing all of this research and all this work to help other people understand and hear this message when I'm talking about polysaccharides or other parts of nutrition or exercise or whatever, but also living that life, being somebody that people will look to and say, yes, he lives it. I don't look like I'm morbidly obese and I couldn't walk from here to my mailbox without falling over from a heart attack, because I'm in very poor shape and I have no self-awareness of my own health, even though I'm, telling everybody else how to be healthy. So for me, like, health is, other than the time that we're granted in this life, this physical existence, our health is our number one characteristic. There's nothing else that even compares. I don't care how much money you have or any other physical possessions. If you don't have your health, what do all those things matter? And so we can't do anything about the passage of time. That's just part of, again, this thing that we call life. But we can do a lot about taking care of our body and our mind and being healthy and living an optimally healthy life. And so that's part of, my journey, and again, spreading a message to people about nutrition and supplements and exercise in general, but these polysaccharides in particular, because again of how meaningful they have been to me and shaping things that have occurred for me in my life. And here I am today talking to you about this, like I have so many other people in the past. But it's, again, great to be here with you. And however you'd like to steer the conversation about the polysaccharides and the research, I'd be happy to share that with you and your listeners.
Well, it's clear you practice what you preach, and it's very important for us leaders and teachers to be a testament to what we're saying. There are a few I know who are not, which just blows my mind. But I don't know, I'm sure you'll agree in regards to the bodybuilding aspect and the whole weightlifting and putting resistance and force on the body. Not only is there an element of health there, but there's a big factor of doing stuff like that that builds character and resilience as well, which I think if you don't have strong character and resilience, you're going to struggle with other aspects of life, regardless of staying on plan with nutrition or your plan to build a business or buy a second home or whatever. Because a lot of people don't understand a big part of getting your ass to the gym, it is not just for the physical work, it's the mental health work. It's forcing yourself to do hard stuff. And that often gets overlooked, I think.
I completely agree with you. I mean, there's so much, we want everybody's looking for a magic bullet or instant gratification or a quick fix. Everybody wants it like that. But
Mhm.
bodybuilding, you're exactly right. It teaches you to be resilient, patient, delay your gratification, work for a goal. Unless you're the biggest genetic freak on the planet, and there are not many people like that, you can't just, lift weights for a couple of weeks and then go out on a stage and do well in a competition. It doesn't work that way. You have to
Mhm.
train your body for months, even years in
Years.
some cases, to get to a point where you can really do well with that type of pursuit. And ultimately at the end of the day, like I said, I was not going to do drugs. I definitely would not cross that line. And
Mhm.
I didn't really feel, quite frankly, when I was in competition shape, when I was down, 3, 4% body fat, I didn't really feel healthy. I mean, you talk about mental health. I would be
It's
very
tough.
moody and irritable. And so I don't really think, number one, the body isn't supposed to be that lean anyway all the time. I mean, maybe, again, for one day you can, or a couple of weeks you can pull it off. But unless you're just genetically that lean all the time, that's a different person. But for all the rest of us who have to get into competition shape and get down to that level of leanness, man, that takes a very serious toll on your mental health. And
Mm.
I just didn't, at the end of the day, feel like, being that lean was healthy for the long term. It just didn't feel healthy to me.
Well,
But again, I love the benefit of strength training, of weight training. I love how it makes my body feel. I love the mental component of it, of blowing off stress, steam, whatever, all those things. I mean, I'm so into high intensity explosive movements. And that's why I tell people too, like, walking is okay, but it's not really, you're not really pushing yourself when you just go for a walk around your neighborhood. That's not really stimulating the body in a way that will ultimately give you the best physiological benefit from your exercise training. So if you're very obese and you're just getting started, by all means, just do your walking, but you have to step up the intensity, and ideally you start incorporating weight training pretty quickly.
mm. Well, I think just back to what you're saying about the steroid aspect of things, I think the body knows. I think it tells us on some level what it wants and what it doesn't want. And for those of us that have learned to listen to our body, we know what's good and what's not good. And by all means, there's more than enough natural bodybuilders out there who look amazing. But it does come down to really listening to your body and what not only what does it want, but also what does it like so you can continue to support it, which brings us to the polysaccharides that you've brought up a couple of times. I'm sure there's a lot of my clients and followers who will listen to this that will be like, okay, you keep saying polysaccharides, but what are polysaccharides? The lay person doesn't know the science terms. So what are polysaccharides first?
Yes, absolutely. So psychologists refer to something called the teachable moment, and that's when you have an opportunity to be open to learning something new. So for most people, understanding what a polysaccharide is clearly is a teachable moment. So if you look at the two roots of the term, poly, the prefix many, and then saccharide means sugar, so many sugars. So polysaccharides are simply lots of simple sugars attached together with these very sophisticated and complex bonds that create this really dynamic, dense of information compound that you cannot even draw on a piece of paper. It's like a 5D image, basically.
Mhm.
And so these particular complex sugars that we've studied from aloe vera and rice bran, I would argue are as effective and as beneficial as anything else that Mother Nature provides for us to promote health. And so when I hear people use these blanket terms like sugar is bad for you, and we as Americans, and I don't know about the Irish and the Canadians, maybe you guys hear the same thing, but people, at least in the United States, tend to, you hear the word sugar and you immediately think bad. But
Well,
as
for
a
the last
scientist,
decade at least.
exactly. I mean, probably the last half century,
Mm,
it's just this constant notion of, oh, sugar, bad. You
mhm,
don't even think for a second that any kind of sugar could be good for you. But for me, as a scientist, as a writer, as somebody who's very particular about our language, I want our listeners to appreciate the fact that all sugars are not created equal. And there are two very important characteristics about any sugar to determine its goodness versus its badness. And that is, first of all, the source. So again, I'm talking about things coming from aloe vera and rice bran. Those are two very specific plants that, again, Mother Nature provides for us for health promoting benefit. If you're talking about a monosaccharide or a simple sugar, mono one, saccharide sugar, one molecule of sugar like high fructose corn syrup, we know that that's very bad. It spikes your insulin, it spikes your glucose, it sets you up for all sorts of metabolic complications. If you're eating high fructose corn syrup every day, you're probably eventually going to have a greater risk of diabetes, cancer, heart disease from all of that metabolic activity that you're invoking by eating that stuff. The second most complex sugar is a disaccharide, two sugars. So sucrose, white table sugar, is a disaccharide. It's a very common sugar. Again, it's a sweetener. If you're eating it every day, it's probably not the best thing for your health. And then finally, these polysaccharides that I just mentioned. So the complex sugars that come from rice bran and aloe vera are very, very different, both in their source and in their structure from something like high fructose corn syrup. So just please be mindful of the fact that all sugars are not created equal, and you cannot say that all sugars are bad. That's absolutely a not factual statement, and it's quite frankly being ignorant because you've just accepted someone's message, some public health expert, so-called expert, talking head. But the reality is again, Mother Nature provides a lot of sugars, and some of them are actually very beneficial for us. And that's what we've published and studied all of these years now.
Yeah. As I like to say to people, I'm not too dogmatic about certain eating styles, but I do always drive home the message that human beings are omnivores and we shouldn't be avoiding sugar just because the keto and carnivore people have told us. There's always context to be understood, especially with women, especially women under a lot of stress or childbearing age, and maybe thyroid is implicated somewhere. Like there's a lot to be considered. It's almost negligible to just say, well, I'm just going to go zero sugar and see what happens without considering everything. So you're correct.
That's
But
right.
so polysaccharides, and we'll keep going down this tunnel for a little bit. When polysaccharides come into the body, then what are they doing? What benefits are they giving? What mechanism of action do they have?
So generally speaking, and again, this is not my opinion, this is based on all of the research we've conducted and published. They are essentially acting as signaling mechanisms for the immune system. So what does that mean? Well, our immune system, most people think of our immune system as being our first line of defense against virus, bacteria, fungus, any kind of pathogenic invader. And that's absolutely true. However, the immune system is much more than that. And the best analogy I like to use to describe the immune system is, if you ever go hear an orchestra play and you have the conductor in the front who's doing this and directing all the different parts of the orchestra, the immune system is like the conductor talking to all the other major organ systems. And the immune system helps to keep every other major organ system in balance. And that's a very, very important role that most people they're not even aware of. And so we have to keep our immune system healthy, surveillant, modulated, enhanced, all these different characteristics, so that it can then help to keep all of the other major organ systems in balance and enhanced. If the immune system is not functional, if it's not working properly, we cannot possibly expect our heart disease, our heart cardiovascular system, our central nervous system, our muscular system, all of the other major organ systems to be working properly. It just can't happen. And so the immune system is very vital in so many different roles, and you have then all of these different components to the immune system. So for example, we showed in our multiple sclerosis study that people at baseline had just under 8 infections. They had 7.9. 12 months later on our polysaccharide formula, they were down to 2.5. Infection is actually the leading cause of mortality in people with MS. It's not demyelination. It's actually infection, because you have this dysregulated immune system partially due to the demyelination that doesn't allow the immune system to stay active against infection. And so we actually showed a decrease in infections related to MS and helping people, not only die, but stay out of urgent care in the hospital, where the treatment for all of this is very expensive. So this is one of the components to how these polysaccharides, when you introduce them into the system, I mean, there are lots of different mechanisms of action, but I'm just focusing on the ones we've published. But that anti-infectious mechanism of action is very important. We've showed in our Alzheimer's study an increase in the CD4 to CD8 ratio. Well, what is that? Our CD4 cells are our helper cells. Our CD8 cells are our cytotoxic cells. Those two particular groups of cells work in collaboration with each other, and they need to stay in relative balance. So you don't want to have one going out of control and the other one being suppressed, or vice versa. You really want to have a good balance, an optimal balance between those two components. And so we showed an improvement in that ratio over the course of the 12-month intervention with people with Alzheimer's disease. We also showed lowering of inflammation. So we know that chronic inflammation is basically related to every chronic disease you can think of today. There's literally no chronic disease that does not have a component related to inflammation. So TNF-alpha and VEGF are two inflammatory markers that have been historically looked at in heart disease and cancer. And our paper was probably one of the first papers that showed a reduction of inflammation according to the use of our polysaccharide formula. We showed an increase in adult stem cell production according to CD14 cells. So why do we live every day? One of the reasons that we're able to keep going every single day until death is that our cells have this programmed life and cell death cycle in them. And we're constantly recreating ourselves, basically. So every single cell in the body has the capacity to regenerate itself. And through the process of adult stem cells, the immune system creates these adult stem cells that have the capacity, they're called pluripotent, they have the capacity to turn into a muscle cell, a bone cell, a neuron, a heart cell, a skin cell, a kidney cell, all these different types of cells. So we know that the polysaccharides are able to help turn into adult stem cells to then migrate to the brain or wherever else the body has this own inherent intelligence to guide it to where damage is, to be able to replace that particular area or aspect of the body. We've showed rebalancing of the pro versus the anti-inflammatory components of the immune system. This is also very important. When you have trauma, if you're involved in a car accident, let's say, and you've been injured, you want those pro-inflammatory signals to work, right? That type of acute inflammation is actually not only necessary for healing, it's actually necessary to just live, to actually be able to recover from that trauma and then get back to homeostasis. The anti-inflammatory side or components of the immune system, when that initial trauma is repaired and healed, then the immune system sends out these anti-inflammatory signals to shut all that down, because you don't need it anymore, because you don't need those growth factors and those other materials coming into where the damage or where the trauma is. You don't need it anymore. So you need that balance as well. And so we've been able to show to rebalance it's called the Th1, the pro-inflammatory side, and the Th2, the anti-inflammatory side. We've been able to show effects there as well. So I could go on and on of other effects that have been demonstrated in, from other laboratories around the world, but just sticking to what we've shown just here at the University of Miami, we've shown a very impressive amount of mechanisms of action just in our two studies in people with Alzheimer's disease and multiple sclerosis.
That's fascinating. And the fact that your main focus on immunity right now, I think, is very important because, as many of us know, the immune and stress system are very intricately intertwined. And I don't know about your client base, but my client base is super stressed. I actually don't know anyone who's not stressed anymore. Like I
Right.
was saying to you at the start of our conversation, that I was just recovering from a head cold, and I'm convinced it's from stress, from overworking. So it's important to understand the connection there, but also how we can support it. One thing that's interesting that you mentioned is the aloe vera aspect. I think the last thing people would ever consider aloe vera to be would be a sugar. No, no, it's just a gel, isn't it? Water? Isn't it just water with minerals? So, can you go into that a little bit more and explain the aloe vera aspect? Because I do use aloe vera a lot with my clients in the context of the actual gel. And generally, only if I see someone with degenerative spinal issues or bulging discs or something, I found it to be very therapeutic just using the gel in a juice or a smoothie or something. But can you tell us a bit more about the work you're doing and how the aloe vera comes into that?
Well, first of all, most of the time when someone hears anything about aloe vera, he or she probably will initially associate that with either a sunburn or a cut or a wound, where, as you're mentioning, using the gel, you apply that topically and then it helps to promote healing. And we know too, through reading old texts, that humans have been using aloe vera for thousands of years. So obviously, people many, many years ago discovered that this amazing plant has health promoting and healing properties. Well, I'm not saying don't keep using your gel on a topical issue. That's fine. That's okay. But the reality is the polysaccharides, it's acetylated polymannan. That's a very technical term for this particular polysaccharide that you find in aloe vera. That is really the magic, or that's the reason why if you take some of that gel and you're sunburned and you apply it to your skin, that's why it helps to promote the healing process. So you can think of the acetylated polymannan or the polymannose or the ace mannan. Again, there are several synonyms for this polysaccharide, but that sugar, that complex sugar, is the reason why aloe vera is so special for us. Now, if you're the kind of person who is drinking, and we have, by the way, we here in Miami, we have aloe vera growing in our yard, but I'm not out there every day, snipping a leaf and sucking the gel down. I don't need to do that. I've already got a product that's taken all that hard work out of the equation, but the gel is 98.5, 99% water. So imagine what nutritional content is in that gel is very diluted, extremely diluted. So, and you don't just have polysaccharides, you have amino acids, fatty acids, vitamins, minerals, elements. I mean, it's literally a powerhouse. It's a powerhouse of nutrition. But of course, again, a lot of those materials, those compounds are very diluted because of all that water. So what we've done, first of all, stripped out all of the water. And then second of all, taken out a lot of the other different nutrients and compounds to really get as much of a pure extract of the polysaccharide as possible. And then when you concentrate that into a powder of, say, a few hundred milligrams, or, in the case of somebody who's really sick, who's got a really serious life-threatening health challenge, maybe a couple of grams per day. But really, you don't need that much material, especially in the context of the average person eating 2,000, 2,500, 3,000 calories per day. I mean, really, when you're only talking about a couple of grams of material and how bioactive and how efficacious this material is, it's incredible. When you look at it from that perspective of, well, gosh, I only need a few hundred milligrams to maybe a gram or two, and I can get all of this bioactivity out of it, that's incredible. I mean, compare that to, again, basically anything that you want to talk about. And the rice bran story is kind of interesting too. You didn't ask me about rice bran, but I'll share it with you anyway if you're interested. So 70 to 80% of the rice sold in the world is white rice. Well, rice has basically three main layers. You've got the outer layer, the husk or the hull, That's completely inedible. That's like putting straw in your mouth. You can't, you barely chew it, let alone try to digest it. So that the husk gets stripped off first. The very next layer is now the rice bran. Well, again, 70 to 80% of the rice sold in the world is white rice. So the rice bran gets stripped off. It either gets thrown away or fed to livestock, ironically enough. And then that white endosperm is the white rice that most of the world prefers to eat. And that's basically just digestible starch. I mean, it's certainly, nutritious on that level of just getting some complex carbohydrate, but it doesn't have all of those bioactive polysaccharides and other nutrients that the rice bran has. So for any of you out there listening, thinking, well, I eat rice every day, but it's white rice. Unfortunately, you're not getting any of the rice bran. And even if you do eat brown rice every day, and I actually eat, I wouldn't say every single day, but probably 4 to 5 days per week, I eat brown rice. That, again, depending on your age and your health status and what you're dealing with, you may not get enough concentrated rice bran to really have a physiological or a therapeutic benefit. So that's what we've done. We've put these two materials together in one of our products that we promote. And I would just put it up against anything. I mean, maybe the only other thing, and again, I'm talking things that come from Mother Nature. I'm not talking about drugs or synthesized materials, but maybe curcumin. That would be the only other plant that comes from turmeric that I would put, roughly on the same level in terms of efficacy and effectiveness for what it can do for human health. And I think it's also important to say, even though you're in Canada and maybe your rules are a little bit different there, but in terms of, what you can and cannot say in the United States, the FTC does not allow us to make nutrition claims about disease. So what does that mean? It means that you cannot say that you can use nutrition or a dietary supplement to say that you can cure, treat, manage, or prevent a disease. So, and I've never said that. And I don't want anybody, to listen to our conversation today and then go and say, well, Lewis said you could use nutrition to treat disease. I'm not saying that at all. And I never do. What I'm saying is the nutritional model is providing the raw materials to the body in terms of what we consume. The genes look at that information. The genes don't do anything until they receive information from the environment. And then they take that information from what you've provided and they guide the cells in how to function properly. That's the nutritional model, because you need polysaccharides, amino acids, fatty acids, vitamins, minerals, elements, cofactors, metabolites, all these different things for our cells to function properly. The pharmacological model is you take one chemical or synthetic material, you try to alter a metabolic pathway to then treat a symptom of a disease. And that's a very specific, like a sniper rifle type of analogy. That's a very specific indication that drug is used for. So I want people to be very clear. I'm talking about providing the raw materials that the body needs to function properly, that then through the body's own inherent intelligence allows it to repair, restore, and heal itself, and hopefully return to homeostasis. Completely different paradigms, totally different approaches. And again, I am not talking about using nutrition to treat disease.
Basically, what we're saying is that if you give the body what it needs to heal itself, then it will heal itself.
Correct.
So I know somebody's going to be asking, apart from the rice bran and aloe vera, where else can we get polysaccharides, whether or not it's supplementation or dietary?
Great question. And people also ask me that question a lot as well. So pretty much every vegetable, every grain, maybe not as many nuts and seeds, certainly a lot of different seaweed, certainly a lot of the exotic mushrooms, lion's mane, shiitake, reishi, those kinds of mushrooms, they will all have some level of polysaccharide content. Now, I don't profess to be an expert in a lot of these other foods or plant types. I really focused most of my career just on aloe vera and rice bran, but you can get, especially in the seaweeds and in the mushrooms, you can get very good polysaccharide content. For example, I know lion's mane mushroom has gained some popularity here in the last couple of years as being a promoter of brain health and
Nootropic, yeah.
helping the immune system function, much like the rice bran and the aloe vera. And the reason why that lion's mane does that is because of its polysaccharide content.
Hmm. Hmm. I wasn't sure if you were going to bring that up, the mushroom aspect, but I'm glad you did. One of my favorite products, you've probably heard of them, is mushroom coffee from Four Sigmatic. So Four Sigmatic, they use water and alcohol extract of medicinal mushrooms, and they have all different ones. But the main active compound is the polysaccharides in it.
That's right.
Specifically, one I love, yeah, I use the lion's mane for the nootropic aspect, but for immunity, I like the chaga one because a lot of the research around chaga, whatever way you pronounce it,
Mhm.
shows that that may be one of the top medicinal mushrooms for immunity. So I've been drinking a lot of it. But just to my clients will be happy to hear that because they drink a lot of this mushroom coffee, albeit it's super expensive in Canada, along with everything else. It's an easy way to get those polysaccharides in for sure. So I'm glad you brought that up. Um, I was wondering if you don't mind circling back to the research that you've done. Have your laboratory or any of the other labs that you've been in conversation with, has anyone done any research around the polysaccharides specifically on thyroid function?
No clinical trials, but I have had several clients with nodules in their thyroid take the polysaccharides in my formula, and then their thyroid function increases, improves, the nodules go away. So anecdotally, yes. Unfortunately, no money to fund a clinical trial at this point.
Yeah. And the reason I ask is because a lot of what you were saying earlier with all the different studies, as you were listing them, I was like, that sounds very familiar. I don't know if you're aware of Dr. Broda Barnes. He was always a thyroid specialist. He's passed now, but he has a book on hypothyroidism. If you can get your hands on it, I think you'll really enjoy it. It's a good read. It's not for everyone. It's not overly complicated. Like it's pretty great. But in that he lists the connection between hypothyroidism with MS, with all these different immune issues, with skin issues, obviously thyroid issues, low stem cell count, low blood count, cardiovascular
Wow.
disease, pretty much everything you were saying, they're bringing it back to hypothyroidism. So then that begs the question, which came first, the thyroid or the immune system? And
Right.
obviously the whole system's intertwined and connected. You can't do one without the other. um but right down to the cancer theory, the diabetes theory, pretty much everything. So I think you'd really enjoy that book if you can get your hands on it.
If, yeah, I would love, if you don't mind, maybe after our conversation, if you would.
I will email it over to you. Yeah,
Okay.
no problem. So it's interesting, especially to minds like ours, how the body is so intertwined. And as one person speaking to another, you'll recall certain things and they're, oh, that's interesting. I wonder if they're connected to this. So I wanted to, if you don't mind, continue with our polysaccharide topic, but could you kind of talk about the Western diet that most people, and I'm going to say most people, are following? I say this to my clients all the time. Sometimes we're driving up the road, and I'm sure it's in Miami a lot. And Calgary is pretty active, but in a different way. And you'll see all these people out walking their dogs and running, and you'll think, oh my God, everybody's so healthy and active. And I'm like, well, no, if you look at the big picture, that's a really small percentage. You just happen to be driving down the road at the right time. Um,
That's right.
so the majority of people, and we know this from the studies and the statistics around obesity and metabolic syndrome and whatnot, are following a Western style diet. What's the problem with that, and how depleted is it of polysaccharides?
Well, the first part of that question is a very loaded gun, and we
Yeah.
could probably spend just an hour on that conversation. I think, yeah, I mean, where do you begin? Like if you go back all the way to the Green Revolution in the 1960s, the Green Revolution came with the promise of being able to eliminate hunger.
Mm.
Well, hunger is still alive and well today. Hunger hasn't gone anywhere. Unfortunately, I say we people make plenty of food. It's just a lack of food distribution, not food production. That's the reason why there are still hungry people in the world. But once we started down that path of introducing all of these pesticides, herbicides, fertilizer into the food growing process, and then doing all of this monocrop type production where the traditional way of farming kind of is not completely gone, but it's certainly gone in a lot of cases in the United States. A lot of small family farms have been driven out of business and been taken over by these corporate large scale operations. So that's one level of input that I think has had a deleterious impact on our soil quality, certainly.
Mhm.
And then later, a decade or so after that, you had genetic modification. That was like that was the next big step. Oh, well, we're going to genetically modify corn and soy and wheat and some of these other crops to make them resistant to pests and drought and all these other things. Well, what did that do? That caused all of this. I mean, you can argue that it caused all of this explosion in autoimmune issues and, things like allergy. I mean, all this stuff was hardly even recognized 100 years ago. Now you can't even, I mean, if you talk to 10 random strangers, probably five or six of them have some kind of autoimmune allergy issue.
Or
And a lot of
more.
that,
Yeah.
or more exactly. And a lot of that's probably attributed to all this genetic modification that we've done to our food. And then of course, along the way, what happened? You had, well, not along the way, in the late 1950s, early 60s, you had the introduction of fast food. McDonald's. I always like to make a joke. Darth Vader is not the original evil empire. It's McDonald's. Like you just think of what fast food has done to people. And then you have just sort of this, I hate to say it, but it's like a laziness toward grocery shopping and food,
Right.
going out and actually buying your own food and then cooking it and preparing it. I mean, it's like, how many people don't even do that anymore? It's like I know so many people that hardly ever cook. I mean, I don't know about you. I love to cook actually. I actually love the experience. I guess I'm a weirdo, but I love the experience of going and shopping for my own food and then actually preparing it for my family because I know exactly what we're putting into our mouths as opposed to just driving through some window and picking up something to go or even going to a restaurant. And don't get me wrong, I like going out to a restaurant occasionally.
Mm.
I enjoy going out for a good meal here or there, but I mean, man, I'm cooking literally every day. I make food every day for my family and myself. And so for me, that is just such an important component of health. And so to answer your question about the standard Western diet, it's just, it basically centers around convenience rather than health. And so you can pick and choose whatever target you want, whether it's eating, too much animal food, too much sugary food, too much processed food, too much salted food, too much genetically modified food, too much contaminated food. I mean, just, kind of take your pick of any of those. And then you can find a lot of research to back up exactly what point you're trying to make. I mean, again, me as somebody eating a plant-based diet for 27 years, obviously I've shifted my focus. I mean, I grew up in a family where we ate for taste, not for health.
Mm.
And my dad thought a meal was not a meal without three things. It had to have at least three things: a glass of milk, a piece of bread, especially some kind of white bread, and a piece of beef, or we didn't eat much fish or anything like that growing up in Tennessee, but definitely some kind of meat. He could have any other types of vegetables or fruit, but he needed those three things, or he didn't really think that was a meal. He definitely changed a lot later in his life before he died. But those are the kinds of things that I think culturally we just eat for taste and convenience, and we don't really think how powerful every time you bend your elbow and open your mouth and stick something in it, that's actually the most powerful behavior that you will do to yourself every single day, day after day.
Do
And
you
if
mind
you're
if I
only
just stop you for 1 second before I forget? Because I will forget. And it's back to you cooking your own food and enjoying your own food, and you look forward to that and really take pleasure in doing that. And as you're speaking, it brought me back to our conversation around the gym and weightlifting. Do you think the people like yourself and myself who do cook our own meals and we feel the benefit of that, do you think part of that comes back to valuing ourselves, like self value and understanding our self worth? We've put in the time in the gym, we care about our health, we care about what we put in our body. And that's why we have a different relationship with food, and we can really savor in those moments and obviously extract the nutrition. But do you think it's how one values themselves that influences those dietary habits and choices?
100%, I could not agree with you more. I think that the average person on the street has health. They may sort of talk, superficially. Oh, yeah, health is important to me. Oh, yeah, I'm going to start to the gym next week. Oh, yeah, I'm going to start cooking again, whatever, like, and it's always tomorrow, right? Or it's always
Tomorrow never
kicking,
comes, as the song
it's
goes.
always kicking the ball down the road. You keep kicking the ball down the road. And then the next thing you know, you're at the end of your life and you never picked up the ball and actually played with it. But
Mm,
I completely agree with you. I mean, for people like you and me who actually value our health, we're the people who actually do the behaviors to actually be healthy. You can't just talk about being healthy and then not do it. You have to support your idea of being healthy with the behaviors that actually create health.
yeah.
Otherwise, it's just a conversation that's vapid and useless.
Yeah. And a lot of people, let's just continue on with this. A lot of people will say I'm too tired or I don't have enough time and it's so
Right.
hard. And I keep saying, well, it actually gets easier the more you do it. It does. You get into your little habits and routines and you start to know what food you like, what's easy and fast to do. But also, there was a concept put forward by the late Dr. Ray Peat. I don't know if you've heard of it, but he always spoke about that the healthier the body is and the better the metabolism and the energy system is, then the more likely that person is going to be creative, artistic, but also motivated to move, to be proactive with preparing their own food. So then we could spin it back to, well, your energy system, your metabolism is basically shit. And that's part of your problem. And in the beginning, yes, it is going to be hard, but the more that improves, the easier it does get, not just in the habit formation, but in making the body healthier and helping it work better again. I suppose I'm rambling a bit, but this all comes back to the context of understanding how it all really works.
Totally agree with you. And I'm sure you and I are the same on this. When anybody tells me, oh, I don't have time to exercise or
I don't
shop
have
for
time.
food, or
Yeah.
I mean, really, like, come on. I just I don't I and I'm not, my personality is not to be aggressive or to just intentionally insult people. Unless I'm insulted first, then I'll stand up for myself. But I have to bite my tongue to not just be like, "Arr," like to bite somebody's head off, because to me that's just an excuse. And when you think about how much time people spend on social media, and you can't go around town without everybody looking at their phone the whole time they're out. I mean, it's
Hmm.
fascinating to go to a
Sad.
restaurant
Yeah.
and see like two or three or four people sitting at a table and they're all staring at their phone. They're not even talking to each other. They're not even engaging in conversation with each other. They're just sitting there staring at their phone. And so how much time do people waste on social media or their smartphone when some of that time could be devoted to working out and cooking and shopping for food and doing the things that are actually part of a health promoting lifestyle? people waste so much time. It's incredible.
The phones paralyze us.
It
It's
does.
almost an external stimulant. Before you know it, you haven't actually moved for an
That's
hour
right.
because this psychological paralyzation, it just stops. It's
That's
crazy
right.
how it works.
It's like an
And
addiction.
yeah, that's why we're doing this in video, but I also will publish the audio because I say to my people, put headphones on, listen while you walk, while you clean, while you're doing stuff. You don't have to sit and watch us as attractive as we are. You don't have to watch us.
That's right.
Um, but the back to just before we go back to the polysaccharides, that it sometimes we do have to bite our tongue, and I think that comes back to the gym mentality of we can go hard and push ourselves to do hard things. But for my clients, I'll keep saying, just trust the process. I promise it will get easier. It will get easier, not only the habit formation, but as your body starts to function better, everything will get easier. So just reassuring our listeners of that. It's not all doom and gloom.
That's right. Well, an adaptation is a wonderful thing. I mean, when you get over, if you've been sedentary since maybe high school, you haven't really exercised for years or decades, and now you're ready to start working out and really getting serious about your physical activity.
Mhm.
Once you get over that hump of 2 or 3 weeks of extreme soreness, then the benefits really start kicking in. And it's amazing, like you were talking about energy and how much your energy will go up and how much better you will feel. But you have to be patient and you have to allow it, like you said, for the
Mhm.
process to work. And you can't expect instant gratification. You have to allow your body to adapt. But that adaptation principle is incredible.
Yeah, it is. And before I rudely cut you off, I apologize. You were going to just kind of touch on how devoid our food is of these polysaccharides if we're not purposely going out of our way to get them.
That's exactly right. And that's the reason why I think in some cases dietary supplements can be so effective. In the case of these polysaccharides, I think vitamin D is another good example of, especially for you guys living in the northern latitudes where you don't get as much sun as we do here in Miami or other parts of Florida. So making sure you keep your vitamin D level checked and then take a supplement if you are low, if you don't metabolize it very well, making sure that you elevate your vitamin D. But yes, definitely we're not getting, say, compared to 100 years ago before all of this bastardization of our food production took place, food was definitely more nutritious, and now it's not.
Mhm.
And in the case of aloe vera, I mean, people don't normally eat aloe vera anyway, so it's such a special nutrient. Why would you not want to take it, even knowing that you can't get it from food? You have to get it from a product like ours. And then in the case of rice bran, again, most of the world is eating white rice, so you really have to either eat your brown rice every day. Although I would still argue you probably can't eat enough just from food, especially if you have some ongoing, whether it's neurodegeneration, cancer, diabetes, heart disease, something the body's really dealing with to overcome. Why, again, would you not want to give it as much as you can of this material to have these health promoting benefits?
I know somebody's going to ask, and you've probably been asked this before. Somebody out there is saying, well, what about aloe vera water? Can I get the same benefits?
Exactly. And that's what I was mentioning before. Like, it's too diluted. It's 99% water. So you will have to drink bucket loads of that aloe vera juice or gel to get the therapeutic benefit from the polysaccharide. You'll end up having diarrhea or, some other stomach
Mm.
problem to try to get that much polysaccharide content in one of those aloe vera drinks. It's too diluted.
Mm. So drink it, but you may not get the concentration or all the benefits that we've been mentioning here.
That's right.
So
I'm
no
not saying
harm.
don't do it. I'm just saying don't expect the same results of what we've published from our research because it's not concentrated enough in a liquid.
Yeah, yeah. So you do have a supplement that is concentrated aloe vera. Where can people find out more about your supplements? Is there a specific page? And also, do you have a separate page yourself where you talk about nutrition?
Yes, so I left academics full time 7 years ago to go into the dietary supplement business, and That's been no bowl of cherries, but but you know, you take a punch or two in the gut and you get stomped on by people, and you keep, you know, if you're passionate about what you do, you just keep moving. You learn from your mistakes. And so this is now my company is called Dr. Lewis Nutrition. Anybody who wants the best, most comprehensive amount of information, go to drlewisnutrition.com. That's Dr. No period Lewis, Lewis, nutrition.com. You will see all of the research there summarized, all sorts of videos, product reviews. I mean, you name it, it's just loaded. All the FAQs are loaded with so much information. Daily Brain Care is our flagship product. That's the name of the product that originated from all the research on Alzheimer's and MS. I'm very proud of all the work that I've done. If anybody, you know, has any questions, they can go there. We have a phone number, email address. I'm happy to answer any questions. And then under, excuse me, the Dr. Lewis Nutrition handle, you can find us on pretty much all the typical social media channels as well. So there's, you know, on all the social media channels, of course, the videos are going to be very short, not much detail, but again, go to drlewisnutrition.com. That's the best, most comprehensive source of information.
And I have all the links. I'll post them all in the description as well. And you know what, Dr. Lewis, if you eventually get around to doing a study on thyroid and polysaccharides, I would love to have you back on to discuss that. I know a lot of my followers will be interested to hear what you found there. I'll
Beautiful.
have to send you the name of that book as well. So before I let you go, if you don't mind, could you list for us, just to give my followers and clients, your top 5 tips or habits for improving their health or achieving some sort of better health?
Top 5, I would say, you know, again, and this is, excuse me, my own bias. I've been eating a plant-based diet for 27 years. I would say if you don't want to go completely plant-based, at least probably like 80% of your diet be plant-based. Try not to overdo the meat and the dairy, you know, really kind of limit that, make it more of a sort of a garnishment as opposed to the main course of your meal. I'd say that's number 1. Number 2, and again, this may sound completely promotional, I'm sorry if it does, but I just haven't seen, again, maybe compared to curcumin, but I haven't seen anything else. And I know you're big fan of the mushrooms. But these aloe vera and rice bran polysaccharides, I would just put up against anything. And prevention is just as important as treatment, right? We don't want to end up with neurodegeneration or cancer or diabetes and then try to figure out what to do about it. We want to prevent those things in the first place. So my goodness, why would you not want to utilize these polysaccharides in a preventative manner to help stay healthy? Number 3, I would say definitely physical activity every single day. Don't even take a day off. I mean, unless I'm sick or traveling, I work out every day. And you've got to have, ladies especially, you know, a lot of times ladies, they're concerned about losing their masculinity or whatever that's all about related to strength training. You don't need to worry about that. Do your strength training. It's so important. Please exercise every single day. Number 4, water, hydration. Hydration is so important. We've got so many people walking around dehydrated, and dehydration is related to all these different chronic diseases we've been mentioning. In fact, if you just drink your adequate water every day, you can help prevent a lot of these chronic diseases of aging. And then finally, number 5, I would say, is probably making sure you get 6 to 8 hours of good sleep every night. Sleep is so important, not just to rest and help us feel better, but the body actually has all of these mechanisms to clear out all of this metabolic waste that we accumulate through the day, especially in the brain. That's so important. Insomnia is a leading risk factor for eventual dementia. So you've got to make sure that you get your 6 to 8 hours of good quality sleep every night. Those would be my 5 recommendations. And I stand behind those because those are exactly what I do every single day.
Well, thank you for that. And thank you for mentioning sleep. My followers will think I paid you to say that because
I promise she didn't.
I always say sleep is number 1. If you're not sleeping, you can't conquer anything else at all.
That's right.
So
Amen
thank
to that.
you for saying that. Thank you for your time. I hope you feel better too.
Thank you. Yes, I'm starting to
We're
lose my voice just a little
we're
bit.
both sniffling and
Yes.
coughing. Not a great testament for our polysaccharides, but however, trust us, we know what we're talking about. Well, thank you for your time. And like I said, if you ever get around to that thyroid polysaccharide study, I would be very interested to hear what comes of that.
Okay, beautiful. I'll certainly let you know, and I'm happy to come back on your show anytime. If you'd like to have me back, I'd be more than happy to.
Awesome. Yeah, it was a great conversation. So thank you for that.
Thank you so much.
Enjoy your day and feel better soon.
Thank you.